A different D-Day, the strategic birth of Operation Dragoon in the summer of 1944. As the Second World War reached its decisive phase, Allied forces prepared for another massive amphibious assault on Nazi-occupied Europe. This time, however, the armada assembling in the Mediterranean was not bound for the beaches of Normandy. Instead, on August 15, 1944, Allied paratroopers, sailors, airmen, rangers, and infantrymen set their sights on the sun-soaked coastline of southern France. Their mission was no less ambitious than that of June 6, establish a secure beachhead, break out into the interior, liberate French territory, and accelerate the collapse of German control in Western Europe. The operation, codenamed Operation Dragoon, had been conceived as early as 1943 under its original name, Operation Anvil. Although the Normandy landings under Operation Overlord had become the centerpiece of Allied strategy, the Mediterranean option never disappeared. By mid-1944, the need for additional ports, fresh supply routes, and maneuver space made southern France increasingly attractive. The success of Allied forces in Normandy and Italy created momentum, but also exposed logistical strain. Ports in northern France were operating at full capacity, and the slow advance through Italy's rugged terrain underscored the need for an alternative approach. Southern France offered what the Allies desperately needed: deep water ports at Toulon and Marseille, open terrain for mobile warfare, and a chance to bring additional Allied forces, especially French units, fully into the liberation of their homeland. The strategic debates surrounding Dragoon revealed tensions within the Allied command. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill opposed the operation, preferring a thrust through the Balkans to limit Soviet influence in Eastern Europe. In contrast, Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower remained focused on the immediate demands of the battlefield. He needed ports, troops, and speed. On Dragoon promised all three. Political friction and military necessity. Operation Dragoon was as much a political undertaking as a military one. Churchill's resistance stemmed from a strategic vision shaped by post-war realities. He feared that a southern landing diverted resources from a potential drive through Central Europe, allowing the Soviet Union to expand its influence unchecked. His concerns were shared privately by some British planners, but Eisenhower viewed such calculations as premature. For him, victory in 1944 required practical solutions to immediate logistical problems. The ports of Normandy alone could not sustain the growing Allied armies. Marseille, in particular, represented a logistical prize of enormous value. Supporting Eisenhower's position was Charles de Gaulle, leader of the French Committee of National Liberation. De Gaulle was determined that French forces play a central role in liberating France, both for military credibility and political legitimacy. While the United States refused his demand for a French overall commander, it agreed that French troops would spearhead the liberation of Toulon and Marseille, and later form an independent army. These forces, initially designated French Army, BE, were placed under U.S. 7th Army Command, led by General Alexander Patch. Their commander, General Jean de la Treille de Tassigny, was determined not to be sidelined. By early August 1944, political resistance faded. The British Chiefs of Staff reluctantly approved the operation, which was officially renamed Operation Dragoon, to preserve secrecy. Churchill wryly remarked that he had been dragooned into agreement. With the decision made, Allied planners moved rapidly. Pre-war tourist photographs were studied to map beaches, cliffs, and towns. 3 U.S. divisions would lead the assault, followed closely by French forces, many drawn from North African units hardened by years of fighting. The plan was bold but realistic: secure the beaches, repel German counterattacks, seize Toulon and Marseille, and link up with forces advancing from Normandy within weeks. German weakness and the rise of the resistance opposing the Allied landings was the German Army Group G, commanded by General Johannes Blaskowitz. On paper, it appeared formidable, with approximately 230,000 troops assigned to southern France. In reality, only a fraction of these forces, around 30,000 men, were positioned near the invasion beaches. Worse still, many of the best German units had already been stripped away and sent north to confront the Allied breakout in Normandy. Armored formations were especially depleted, leaving the 19th Army responsible for coastal defense with little mobile striking power. The only significant armored unit available was the 11th Panzer Division, an experienced but exhausted formation recently transferred from the Eastern Front to compensate. German commanders relied heavily on static defenses, minefields, beach obstacles, artillery emplacements, and fortified towns. Yet the long Mediterranean coastline stretched these defenses thin, leaving dangerous gaps between points. Compounding German difficulties was the composition of their forces. Many units were understrength garrison formations, poorly equipped and lacking transport. A significant portion consisted of Ostropon conscripts and volunteers from occupied Eastern Europe, whose loyalty was questionable. Communication problems, low morale, and cultural divisions undermined cohesion. Meanwhile, southern France had become a hotbed of resistance activity. After the German occupation expanded in 1942, resistance networks grew rapidly, fueled by resentment toward forced labor policies and brutal reprisals. By 1944, resistance fighters controlled much of the countryside, forcing German units to remain confined to fortified towns and travel only in heavily guarded convoys. Allied intelligence agencies, including the British Special Operations Executive and the American Office of Strategic Services, worked closely with these groups. Small Jedburgh teams parachuted in to coordinate sabotage, intelligence gathering, and direct support for the coming invasion. Their mission was clear: disrupt German communications, prevent the destruction of port facilities, and assist Allied airborne troops landing ahead of the main assault. The airborne assault and the opening blow. In the early hours of August 15, 1944, Allied airborne forces began the opening phase of Operation Dragoon. American and British paratroopers, including units composed of Japanese-American soldiers, dropped inland with orders to seize key crossroads and delay German counterattacks. Their primary objective was the town of Lamouy, a critical junction controlling access to the invasion beaches. Conditions, however, were far from ideal. Thick fog obscured drop zones, scattering units across the countryside. Fewer than half of the paratroopers landed near their intended targets. Paradoxically, this chaos worked in the Allies' favor. German commanders overestimated the scale of the airborne assault, hesitating to commit reserves. Scattered Allied units linked up with local resistance fighters, launching improvised attacks that spread confusion and disrupted German command structures. Simultaneously, seaborne commandos struck German positions on offshore islands and coastal. The U.S.-Canadian 1st Special Service Force neutralized artillery on the Îles d'Hyères, while French commandos established roadblocks along key routes. These preliminary actions were largely successful, setting the stage for the main landings. By dawn, an immense Allied armada, near 900 ships strong, waited offshore. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, escort carriers, and landing craft formed a floating city of steel. Naval and aerial bombardments hammered the coastline, targeting German defenses with overwhelming firepower. When Allied infantry began landing on beaches codenamed Alpha, Delta, and Camel, resistance in most sectors was surprisingly light. Mines claimed casualties, but German defensive fire was limited. At Delta Beach, American troops encountered shattered fortifications and stunned defenders. The exception was Camel Red, where heavy fortifications and intact artillery threatened a bloody assault. At the last moment, commanders redirected landings to the less defended Camel Green, a decision that likely saved hundreds of lives despite later controversy. Breakout, liberation, and German retreat. With the beachhead secured, Allied forces moved swiftly inland. Airborne troops linked up with advancing infantry, sealing off routes that German units might use to counterattack. The feared German response never materialized at scale. Communications disruptions and Allied air superiority paralyzed German command and control. Within days, U.S. divisions pushed north to the Blue Line, capturing Lamouy and advancing beyond initial objectives. French forces landed ahead of schedule and pressed enthusiastically toward Toulon and Marseille. But Hitler ordered the garrisons to fight to the last. But German defenses crumbled under pressure from Allied forces and an increasingly hostile civilian population. In Marseille, local resistance rose in open revolt, aiding French troops who entered the city on August 23. By August 28, both Toulon and Marseille had fallen, yielding tens of thousands of German prisoners. To the north, the retreating German 19th Army attempted to escape up the Rhine Valley. Task Force Butler, a newly formed American mobile force, pursued aggressively but was hampered by fuel shortages. Fierce fighting erupted around Montélimar as U.S. troops attempted to cut the main escape routes. Although American artillery inflicted heavy losses, German rearguards fought skillfully, allowing much of the 11th Panzer Division to escape. By early September, Operation Dragoon had achieved its strategic goals. Allied forces captured Lyon and linked up with Eisenhower's northern armies, uniting the invasion fronts and sealing the fate of German forces in France. Legacy and strategic impact of Operation Dragoon. Operation Dragoon stands as one of the most successful amphibious operations of the Second World War. Historian Samuel Eliot Morrison described it as nearly flawless in execution, citing exceptional coordination between land, sea, and air forces. The invasion benefited from hard-earned lessons learned in earlier operations such as Sicily, Salerno, and Normandy. Its impact was profound. Marseille alone would eventually handle more than a quarter of all Allied supplies entering Europe, enabling the deployment of hundreds of thousands of additional troops. Politically, Dragoon transformed the position of France within the Allied coalition. French forces emerged as a credible and independent army, strengthening de Gaulle's authority and restoring national pride. Yet the operation was not without missed opportunities. Some historians argue that stronger Allied coordination at Montélimar might have trapped the German 19th Army entirely. Others debate whether Dragoon diverted resources from a faster advance into Germany. Still, the consensus remains clear. Dragoon accelerated the liberation of France, crippled German forces in the west, and helped set the conditions for final victory. As Allied armies advanced toward the Rhine and the Red Army closed in on Berlin, the collapse of the Third Reich became inevitable. Operation Dragoon may lack the mythic status of Normandy, but its strategic importance was undeniable. It was the invasion that completed the liberation of France and ensured that the Western Allies could sustain the final, decisive push into the heart of Nazi Germany.